quiet confidence. And that's going to be my little bit of a theme, what you might see for today, this quiet confidence. And it wasn't but a couple of years later, and she did amazingly wonderful. She would participate alongside of her classmates, very excellent in participating in lab. She excels in laboratory work, which you'll soon hear about later. But it wasn't for a couple years later where she took a Chem 488. Any Chem 488 folks out here? Okay. Chem 488 was a little bit different, where you actually had about a 20-minute talk. And she is this kind of individual who likes to challenge herself. She could have spoken a little bit about her biochemistry research, but instead she chose, if I remember right, graphene quantum dots, supporting the premise of mathematical models and research data. Let me just tell you, that's not biochemistry necessarily, because she wanted to challenge herself. This is the kind of person that we see in Lily. And this is what I got to see from her Chemistry 183 younger chemist to her about ready to graduate, taking a 400 level course. I saw so much growth in this individual, and I was so proud of her. She performed well throughout her college career. She navigated this environment with a smile and positive demeanor. Yes, she spoke quietly, but when she spoke, not just faculty, students listened because she had something to say. And it usually gave us the direction that we needed to go in class when she did speak. It's not cockiness, it's quiet confidence. So after graduation, she continued to display this variety of, I would call it, racking up the wins. Speaking with her and her humble nature, she probably, when she's telling her story, might say, then I went from here to there and found some different jobs. I would say that she kept trying to find her interests. She started off with being a lab technician, one of the largest wine producers in the nation. She worked for E&J Gallo. And then you did that for approximately 4 years. And then you worked with winemakers and enologists to go into quality control, QC. So she worked her way up. They don't just let anybody into a quality control lab. You better know what you're doing. You better show it as well. So she could hold her own with high-end analytical chemistry. But she had something yet to be desired. So she started knocking on the door of earning a master's in science and biomedical diagnostics, where she earned her master's at Arizona State University. Unbeknownst to me, she was still looking for her home, and I got a nice call from her. And that call was, hey, I'm looking for a job. Well, during the interview process, this individual gave me a call. And during that interview process, they had a bunch of questions. And every time I said, Lily is doing a great job, gave them information, gave them data as to what she can do. And they finally ended the conversation, do you think Lily can do this job? And I thought, what have we been talking about for the last bit of time? Of course she can do this job. If she can't do the job, I'll eat my hat. And she gave me a call, but a few weeks later, she was hired on at UW as a research scientist engineer position 1. She now works for the Department of Laboratory Medicine at the University of Washington, is responsible for developing, and I have to read this because it looks pretty good and high end, responsible for developing analytical chemistry techniques to quantify proteins and small molecules, as well as determining direct approaches for using mass spectrometry methods for patient care. And so we're going to find out how that's gone. She's come a long way since the Chem 183 lecture and lab person in the summertime. I hope that her quiet confidence isn't so quiet for the next 50 minutes at least. And I'm interested in hearing more about her as you are. So if you would please, let's ask Lily Barahona Carrillo to come and join us.
Thanks. Well, After that introduction, the pressure is real. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Lily, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you today about what I have been up to since college. All right. Well, like Dr. Sorry mentioned, a little bit about me. I graduated in 2016 with my bachelor's in chemistry, minors in bio and math, and I have a master's in biomedical diagnostics. Um, and I'm going to take you on a short journey of your average undergraduate student. I was not actually top of my class. I struggled a lot, but you know what? We're out here, we're surviving, and it's been a lot of fun. Um, let's see. I remember actually attending one of these talks back in the day and remembering that everybody on stage knows things. They had so many fancy qualifications, certifications, publications on the resumes, and I only knew one thing. I really enjoyed the lab, especially general chemistry. So I'm going to take you again on that short journey, the ups and downs, and how I got here. So before my time at Central, I was one of the early students in my high school to attend the Running Start program. Here is a picture of my family when I graduated. And fun fact, I even did a short little YouTube reel promoting the Running Start campaign. During this time, I still was very undecided. I didn't know what I wanted to major in, but I enjoyed my science classes and I knew that I really wanted to pursue the STEM fields. So with that in mind, I wanted to look for a university that really gave me the chance to work one-on-one with professors and where I could feel like I was walking amongst my peers without drowning out in the crowd. So I started at Central at the age of 19, my junior year, and this was intimidating because there's a lot of pressure that goes into choosing your major. One of the things that I've found throughout my career is that it's not a race to the finish line. Take your pace with everything. Science is supposed to be hard. These are not easy topics to grasp your mind around. So don't be shy, reach out to your professors. That is the one benefit, or one of the many benefits of this school, is that you do get a lot of chance to work with them. During my time here, I really struggled, like I mentioned. And it wasn't until much after graduation that I learned of the term test anxiety. That was me. A lot of long nights, a lot of studying. And when I would show up to the exam, it was if I learned nothing. And it was discouraging. But you know what? At the end of the day, sometimes that is science. You're not always going to know the right answer to the certain question that you want, your hypothesis, and that's okay. Just keep persevering, keep pushing forward. You're going to learn so much. While I was here, however, I had the great opportunity to work or to sign up for the STEP program, where I worked with Dr. Kroll in his undergraduate research lab. And I really enjoyed this experience because I got a chance to cultivate the information that I was learning in my lecture, apply it to the bench, and at the end of the day, learn how to read these complicated SOPs. It was a really great experience. 10 out of 10 would recommend if you seriously get anything out of this program, to get a chance to do this. It was great. So then, as graduation nears, obtaining my diploma was truly the biggest accomplishment I've had to date, because I know all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. Another fun fact, I was on the billboard when you came into town for a very long time. Don't ask me how I got there because it really is a mystery to me. But it gave me bragging rights in my family, which is great. I also met my fiance here. He was part of the biology department. So, you know, kind of Romeo and Juliet, he was across the hall at any time. And to this day, we still like to come into town and reminisce and look all the fancy new buildings you guys are getting, which is amazing and makes me totally jealous. Even so, as graduation nears, everyone starts asking you the dreaded question, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do even though you just spent 4 or 5 years super stressed out? You still need to know what you're going to be doing. So for myself, my dad is in engineering and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. At the time, Dr. Rivera was helping me take some courses that I could apply towards transferring into WSU's chemical engineering program. One piece of advice that he gave me that I absolutely never wanted to listen to was don't take all STEM classes at one time. Don't stress yourself out like that. Leave a couple buffers in there, an elective, save yourself the hassle. And I really should have listened. Regardless, I graduated and I did end up moving to WSU. I completed 1 year of their chemical engineering courses. And I realized that I just wasn't studying something that I was passionate about. I was forcing myself to go through these lectures and I stopped being able to justify why I was there. So this was actually a really scary time because now you add on the uncertainty of what am I going to do? So with the bachelor's in the bag and absolutely no direction still, I decided to head out into industry. The job search is almost a full-time job. And I applied to absolutely everything, maybe even things that I was not qualified for. But my Indeed searches really consisted of very general terms, science, chemistry, and Central Washington. One tip that I really give you guys to, as you look forward to your careers, is to look up not only general interview questions, but also science interview questions. And there is a lot of really good resources online for you guys to take advantage of. Another thing to look forward to is look up the average salaries for the positions that you want to get into. That way you have a better idea of what to look for when it comes to a total compensation packages from your employers. Fortunately for myself, I landed my first job at Columbia Winery, which, as Dr. Sori mentioned, it is part of E&J Gallo, which is the largest wine producer in the nation. And I spent 4 really fun years here. I couldn't have asked for a better entry job. I was able to enhance the skills that I learned in school, both in lecture and on the bench, and really bring them in to the QC that I was doing. Some of the fun things that I learned while doing here was SO2 Ripper titrations, pH analysis, a lot of really fun acid-base tasting with the winemakers and enologists. I learned a whole bunch about fermentation. For example, it is explosive. You can't really see it from the tab here. Let me just see if maybe I can minimize it. It's very explosive. So I don't recommend cleaning that up. It was not fun. However, because this position was a pretty good distance from my home, I had to start transitioning into something that was a little closer to the Yakima Valley. And that's when I found myself accepting an offer at the Washington State Department of Agriculture. And here was a prideful moment because I was officially a chemist. I wasn't no longer a lab tech, and that's actually a bit of a difficult role to get out of. So while I was here, the lab was significantly larger than my previous lab, and I got a really great opportunity to start working with some sophisticated instrumentations that you guys will most likely look at during your time here. For example, GCMS, LCMS, and HPLCs, the dreaded chromatograms. These were extremely tough when I was in school. But here you see an example of a software. You'll see peak area, ion ratios, retention times. These instruments are in almost every facet of industry. Chances are you're going to run into them at least once in your career. So definitely pay attention so that you have that information in your back pocket. On the bench, we did a catcher solid phase extraction for a variety of fruit or vegetable commodities. And we analyzed a screen of over 200 pesticide residues for consumer products. At the same time, because I like to stress myself out, I started my graduate school program, mostly because I wanted to give myself a competitive edge in the market. You can get pretty far with a bachelor's, but at the end of the day, I really would recommend looking into graduate school once you're done, if you get the chance. What I decided to do is take a look at what I wanted to do down the line. And I knew that I wanted to go into the health science space. So I studied this Master's of Biomedical Diagnostics, which really gave me a broad perspective on a variety of terms, such as health economics, policy, and regulatory matters of diagnostic equipment that you see in hospitals or clinics. And we also overviewed a lot of diseases, treatments, and predispositions that people may have to be able to apply them to patient management plans. Again, do your research, think outside the box down the line of what you want to be doing with essentially your life again, and really look at Indeed or Glassdoor and see what kind of credentials these kinds of employers are looking for so that you have a set of action items that you can work towards. So afterwards, what did I do? Oh, so afterwards, now that I have this graduate program, I am now at UW Medical Center at Montlake. And here I'm responsible for the development of analytical chemistry techniques for patient care. As Dr. Shori said, we are very focused on using mass spectrometry, analyzing small molecules and proteins for a variety of different diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or human growth hormone. Or detecting human growth hormone. And we use complex matrices such as blood or cerebrospinal fluid. Again, we're using the same instrumentation, LCMS, HPLCs. And one thing that I've learned with this job is it really is a research and development position. Up to this point in my career, I had been given SOPs and action items in all of my training documentation. So very much ABC, this is what you're going to be doing until your year of training is done. This position is very different. You have to be able to search and filter through the intensive amounts of literature, reviews, publications, journals, articles, and take a look at their methods and materials and apply them to the capabilities of your current lab. And that is definitely harder said than done. Or harder, yeah, whatever that saying is. This is also a great space if you want to work towards publications, if that is one of your goals. They really emphasize a great learning environment, and it's been great working here. So for you guys, as you can see, I have hopped around in a variety of different sectors. And what I really want to recommend to you guys is to not be afraid of truly paving your own career path. Nobody is going to have, a direct line to where you want to end up in the next 10, 20 years. So be open and receptive. Don't go into a new job thinking you're already going to know everything, because chances are you don't. And that's okay, because you're going to be learning from, experts in your field. And at the end of the day, chemistry is a really fun career. It is stressful, but as I mentioned, it's supposed to be. These are really complicated topics. You're working either in the medical sector or with products that are going out into consumers and into their homes. It's also a career that can mold into a lot of stages in your life. So if you have a knack for travel, chances are you're going to find a career that allows you to do so. Or if you want something with a better work-life balance, or you simply just want to move to a different state, there's labs literally everywhere. And that is one huge benefit of this industry. Always keep learning, keep pushing forward. Perseverance is key in this industry. And as for me, that question, what now? What are you going to do with your life? It's been 10 very long years since my time at YVC, 3 degrees, 3 jobs later. I just want to coast a little bit and enjoy how far I've come. And I feel very lucky to be able to say that. So with that, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Also do a panel at the end, so all three speakers up there, thank you so much. You'll have an opportunity again, but if anyone has any questions now? Okay.
I'll start with so I have a question for you, the most that you inform our students, for someone who looks like you in the field, how can you describe the difficulties in navigating a world that is predominantly computer? I'm looking for an answer that is as motivating as your talk.
Well, I think that as far as this industry goes, it's something that you have to be comfortable paving your own path in. I am sometimes the only one in the room. And that's okay. Sometimes I think I have blinders and I don't even notice. And then someone will have say a comment and I'll think about it and be like, was that actually something I was supposed to pay attention to or not? I think that at the end of the day, you're there because you're prepared. You're there because you're qualified to be there. And that's all that should matter. So definitely, at least that's how I see it for myself. It hasn't really been too much of an issue. Employers don't really discriminate in that sense from my experience. And it's been great. Yeah, every place that I've worked at has been really accommodating, really great.
What has been your, what would you say has been your biggest challenge scientifically in any of the labs that you've been in so far that you kind of say, yeah, this is a challenge, but man, I nailed it. I really did this.
Oh man, there's so many, especially hopping around. I think for me, it really is just spending time at your job. The training phases are always so difficult because you walk in thinking you know something and you actually don't, or labs just have different lingo or they have different materials, things are placed in different areas. So for me, definitely when I went into the wine industry, I didn't even know winemaking was a thing. It was actually pretty neat how I didn't have to have enology or winemaking to be part of this industry. So just spending the amount of time that I did there, I entered in knowing almost absolutely nothing about winemaking or even knowing it existed, and leaving there feeling like a semi-expert where I could talk about wine all day and you would probably get bored, but so yeah. Mhm. Yes.
Where you remember thinking like lab work in the research direction you wanted to go, as opposed to like going towards industry, doing production or teaching? What was it about research that made you want to go in that direction?
When it comes to research, I think I had more of an interest in exploring different fields, not necessarily because they were research or QC. I just found the field or the sector as a whole, that industry, fascinating, and I wanted to learn more about it. When it comes to research, like I mentioned, I knew that it would be difficult because you don't have those outlined SOPs. And you can definitely be successful hopping into something like that, as long as you're comfortable reading through the extensive amounts of literature, being very proactive within yourself. QC is very much more of, if you just want to get, the basics down, how do I do bench work in this way, or wet chemistry lab, it's really useful to start out there, because everything is already outlined with clear instructions. Hopefully that answered your question.
Kind of piggybacking on Bruce's question. I remember one project, but my advisor said, "Go figure this thing out." And I spent, did literature searches and stuff like that, and I figured it out. And I was like, "This is awesome." Is there a project that you have been on recently, like when you had to develop it yourself?
Yeah.
That like stands out as a yes, I nailed it.
As I did that.
You do that.
Yeah, so right now we're working on a project with extracellular vesicles, which have, well, I just hopped onto this project, so that added to the factor of intensity. I knew nothing yet again, and extracellular vesicles, from my understanding, really have a lot to do with how your neurons kind of communicate. And so they're in a lot of research for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And what we were trying to do is take these samples from Fred Hutch, which are in a lot of collaborations with UW. They gave us these digestive samples and they said, see, put it in your mass spec, see what you can do. And even figuring out how to process that sample that just came in, what are the storage conditions, what quantity should I inject? These are little things that you don't think about. And at the end of the day, I am in a research team. It's not just me. It's not just my mind. And that is the benefit. I got a chance to work with my coworkers and pick their brains and see, hey, what would you do if you were trying to work on this project? Eventually, we did end up processing that sample, ran it through our mass spec. We saw a couple of interesting peptides there, and we sent it out to Fred Hutch to see if they were interested in continuing something else. I think that one would be the most recent one that I'm mostly proud of. Anything else? Alrighty, well, thank you.
Hi, you guys. I've got the honor of introducing Allie Burton to you guys today. Allie did her undergraduate work here at Central, and she got her bachelor's degree in chemical education. And so I think she did research with Dr. Sori at times where she worked on labs, how to improve labs. And she also told me that she did some research with Joanne Peters, which is off in another direction, which is physical organic chemistry. And also it was fun because she was an employee in the stock room for a couple of years. And I don't really think about it that much, but working in the stock room, I think kind of prepares you in the future if you're going into education, just to know the process of what it takes to get chemicals ready, how to do it safely, ordering chemicals, etc. And so I'd like to believe that her time in the stockroom was an educational process that helped her in her future endeavors. And I think it was also at this time that she developed a love for education. I think if I understand correctly, by the time you had your undergraduate degree, you pretty much knew you wanted to go into teaching, be a science teacher. And so she pursued that, and she actually got her master's of education a couple of years after that in 2010. And then she went and got into the workforce and was a science instructor at East Valley High School in Yakima for a number of years. And I can just imagine getting thrown into the faculty department at a big high school. It was probably pretty intimidating at first, but she succeeded there, and then wanted to come closer to Ellensburg. So she took a job at Thorpe High School. And I know a little bit about Thorpe High School, or Thorpe School, if you want to call it that. It's a lot smaller institution. And so I imagine the whole framework was changed when you went to Thorpe. It was just a class of a few students, and they may have been in different grades, and totally different experience. And so she's gaining experience this way. And then 6 years ago, a job opened up at Ellensburg High School, chemistry teacher or science teacher. And she applied for that, and she got that job. And that's pretty amazing to me, because I feel like a science instructor at Ellensburg High School is a pretty coveted position. You get to live in Ellensburg, and you get to teach high school and chemistry and all this stuff. So it's really admirable that she took this path. And then now I'm imagining you're right where you want to be. You've got your family here in Ellensburg. And also she teaches different subjects now. There's chemistry, biology, astronomy, physics, geology. And to me, that sounds really rewarding and really scary at the same time. If somebody told me you're going to teach astronomy next quarter. I would imagine myself hitting the books at night and just being really scared to death to go in there and teach astronomy. But Allie's done all those things and succeeded at all of them. And it was kind of cool. I think it was like 2 years ago, I got a call from Allie and said, "Hey, Tony, turns out I'm going to be the manager of the chemistry stockroom at Ellensburg High School. And I'm wondering if we could go over some things." And so she came over and we looked at the stockroom and we talked over the waste disposal and the safety aspect and the prepping aspect. And it was really, really nice for me to know that I could convey some information to her that's going to help her in her present job. So, like I said, I'm gonna, I asked Allie what she remembered about being a stockroom technician, and she said she worked with sodium hydroxide a lot because she had little pinholes in her clothes all the time. And go for lab coats now, huh? And so anyway, but she also said that the overall process is what she remembers, like mixing chemicals, titrating things, how we get the chemicals down to down to the labs and how they come back. Just the whole process was a learning experience, and I feel really good about that. So I think it's time for me to stop talking and give the mic to Allie.
It's like the first day of school. I have to talk to a room full of people and I don't know you, and it's a little nerve-wracking. So yeah, I'm Allie Burton, and it took me a long time to get back to that coveted position at Ellensburg High School, which is silly that would be coveted because it's in a small little town and I have 85 chemistry students that I see throughout the day, but it is coveted because this valley is beautiful and the community is nurturing, and the Fred Meyer local watering hole is top notch and we see everyone we know. So coming back here and being here really is where I want to be. And it took me a long time to get there. And so I'll talk to you about kind of my process. Let's see if I can navigate all the things. I teach high school. I spend all day with 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids, and sometimes they smell bad and I smell their stinky feet and I laugh at their fart jokes. And it is the best part of my life. Well, I'm married, so that's pretty great. And my 3 kids keep me in a whirlwind all the time, but hanging out with high school students is really, truly what I love. And it took me a lot of floundering to figure that out. So thank you, the professors I had in this room, because you really were with me while I was floundering and figuring this process out. But what I do every day is not this. I have a lecture table, I have a screen, I use it, but what I do is not this. And I think there's a lot of people that think about education and science education, and their ideas are based off of what we experienced when we were there. And for me, that was 25 years ago. So my version of high school chemistry is a lot different than what it is now. So I think the best way to know what I do is to see it. And I'll be honest, 4 of these images I had, the rest of them, I sent out a frantic email to students last night. And I said, come to my room, I need pictures. So you'll see I'm wearing the exact same outfit in some of them, but full disclosure, what I do, I play. I teach AP biology sometimes when they need me to. And that's more than take notes, stand and deliver. So I tell kids to take their shoes off and I roll paper out and we model transcription and translation. And sometimes I don't get it all right, but thank goodness for people who know more than me and a great textbook. And I go back and visit it. We play again. It's a theme. We build tracks. We play with Matchbox cars. One of our childhood memories. And there's a lot happening in that image that is really bad science, but they figure it out. And so I just step back and I watch. And I give them the guidance and I answer the questions and we talk about scientific method and they love it. And this picture was the day before the whole world shut down 2 years ago. And these 3 boys, I taught virtually, I taught through hybrid, and 2 of them are graduating in a few months. And you'll see them in some other images. And this was a memory playing with Matchbox cars that got them through COVID, because we would talk about it and that was powerful. And they missed school because they remembered that in 9th grade science, we played with cars. So that's what I do. I teach chemistry too. So there's a textbook and it's not all playtime. We sit, we talk, we study. One of those boys definitely posed for this picture. They had to get definitions because sometimes it's about language development and we're starting moles. In fact, today was mole day on the wrong date, but mole day. And so they were building their vocabulary because that's a big part of teaching science is understanding the words that we use. But mostly what I do is I make connections. I love to say that it's all about the science and that we nerd out on science every day and we talk about, you know, moles. It's in my head. So Avogadro's number is the big one that was on my mind today, but mostly what I do is I make connections. And the connection in that picture is so powerful for me because this was a group of kids that I got to know so well over 4 years and they're all graduating and they all come back. They all came to heed my call last night in a frantic email and almost all of them made their way back to my classroom this morning to pose for a picture. But what's even more powerful about the connections that I can make with kids through science is that that's my son in the middle there and they embrace him. And they embrace our community and they embrace our student body and they embrace me and they give me the privilege of being a part of their life. And so it's not all connections. Sometimes it's silly. We're doing a solar intensity lab, so I have to prep labs. And sometimes those labs are exhausting and sometimes they end in me getting a little wild because it's a beach ball. So we have to play with it. But here's that group of kids that heeded my call and they came back and they all have their own story to tell and they're all going on, some of them to full ride scholarships to Villanova and UW and Oregon State. Some of them are athletes. Some of them are going to stay here at Central because they love this community the same way I do. But they're great kids and I got to know them by teaching them chemistry. And that to me is the best part. I also work with some great staff. And like Tony said, I get to teach astronomy and geology. And last week and this week, I'm teaching climate change. That's like throwing me for a whole loop because, whew, that wasn't my program. A lot of chemistry, a lot of biology, a lot of college biology. And I'm not a genius. Those of you who had me in class, I was not the smartest person in the room. I was a back row sitter. Yeah. So how do I know that? How can I teach astronomy? Well, it's because of these guys. And Jeff Hashimoto here is pretty well known in the community. He holds my hand a lot because I can't do this in isolation. I bring the ability to connect, but I got to know how to teach it and what to teach. And sometimes I don't know how to do that and I have to call on people to tell me. I share that letter because I go back to what we do as teachers and why it is so powerful. And I know that education, it's hard. It's a hard sell. I'm trying to tell you that teaching is great and teaching is hard right now. And when you're getting a chemistry degree and you could do anything, the doors are open to you. Why would you want to make the amount of money that teachers make? Honestly. But that's it right there. Because I have students that come back to me a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and they tell me that the connections they made with me guide them forward. So that's what I do. Okay, how did I get there? Well, I attended Central. This was not the first place I went. I'll come back to that in a minute. But I graduated my BA in Chem Ed. At the time, that was the degree. And now I think it's a BS. I don't know. Dr. Sori would know about more than I. And now the program is very different. They have this STEM program that's really amazing, and I get a lot of great student teachers from it. I taught at East Valley, and that for me was a trip. I grew up over in University Place near Tacoma. Yeah. Okay. When I lived there in the 80s and 90s, it was a gated community all full of middle and upper class white kids. Yuck. Ugh. My mom used to cart us 5 children in our Ford LTD station wagon with wood paneling into Hilltop, Tacoma to St. Leo's Church during the height of the gang wars and make us go to mass on Sunday. Because she said, University Place is not giving it to us. So how did I get to East Valley? I mean, I grew up in this community. I didn't speak another language. I didn't really understand other cultures. And I went to Yakima. And that was a crazy trip. That was strange, way out of my element. And I walked in on my first day and my principal said, "What can you teach?" And I said, "Whatever you want me to teach. I just want a job." And he said, "Great, you're going to teach college biology." And I went, "Oh my God, I haven't taken a biology class in 4 years, but that's great. I will do it. I'll show up tomorrow and I know what to do." And it was a dumpster fire. Oh, it was terrible. It was so bad, but I had about 15 kids in the room that didn't drop the class and they stuck it through with me. And we got to the end and it was bad, but we made it and I made it. And I figured out that teaching's hard. Man, it's hard. And I can't do it by myself. And I have to figure out how to do this better. So I did. And for 7 years, I built my craft. I established an AP program that was successful. And it went from my 12 students to 60 plus. And they had to split the class into multiple sections. And I got kids to pass a test, right? I mean, that's the goal of the AP class, is to pass, to get that 4 or 5, to get the college credit, to move on to the next part of their life. And I am just the stepping stone. And that's okay. But we got there and I figured out how to do it in an area that was not my expertise, but we learned how. Yakima is kind of a drive. I liked listening to NPR in the morning. I liked my morning coffee, but I had 3 small children in 3 years. Do the math. I have identical twins that are now in 7th grade. And I have my son who is in 5th grade. And driving back and forth to Yakima was almost 2 extra hours away from my small children. So I came to Thorpe. Thorpe, for those of you who are not familiar, it is 12 miles down the freeway. And I taught 6th through 12th grade science. I didn't teach chemistry. I didn't teach biology. I didn't teach physics. I taught 6th through 12th grade science, all in the same room. And that was 27 kids. So it was crazy. It was a big mind flip for me. I had to figure out how to teach all these different kids at all these different levels. And in different areas. I'm teaching chemistry to this kid and astronomy to this kid, and my head was spinning. But it was a whole new professional challenge that pushed me into an area that I didn't ever know I would go there. So that was fun. But I did learn that there is a certain kind of person that can teach middle school, and it is not me. I have middle school children at home, and my husband and I are counting the days for them to be 15. I'm not made for it, but middle school teachers out there, when they are made for it, they are amazing people. But I know that I was meant to hang out with 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids and laugh at their fart jokes. So that's where I went. And I came back to Ellensburg High School. But that's kind of like way down here. I guess I missed the other stuff. While I was at East Valley, one of the things that I realized I needed to do was grow professionally. Aside from taking on content that I didn't know, and I had to learn new things every day, I had to push myself. So while I was there for 7 years, I got my master's. And a master's in education is a little bit different process than a master's that you might pursue if you were going to go into the industry. In education, they say it does not matter where you get your master's from, just get it. So I got it online. And the benefit for teachers is that when you get your degree online is you can keep teaching. So the stuff I was learning through a virtual format, I could use in my class right there. So that was a benefit. But that didn't do it for me. To me, that was just like a hoop I had to jump through to get paid a little bit more. The thing that really helped me grow as a professional was my national board certification. And I completed that in 2000, and I am now recertifying this year. So it's a really powerful certification that says I have a stamp of approval to teach in any state in the US. So I can go move to Oregon if I would like to, or Idaho or Hawaii. In fact, I've considered teaching summer school in Hawaii just to go and live for the summer. So with national board certification, though, it pushes you to try new things, to look at students differently, to look at data differently, to assess learners differently, in a whole different way than what I ever learned as an undergrad or in that really spectacular online master's program I did. So national board certification was huge. Oh, yep. Okay. And then I'm currently finishing my 15th year teaching chemistry. How? There we go. My first path was not my final path. And I bet that I share that probably with most of the people in the room. When I was a kid, I was surrounded by scientists and doctors. My family are chemists, nuclear chemists. A lot of them work at Hanford and Battelle. I have, oncologists and geriatricians. There's a lot of big things, a lot of big heads in the room. And so I just figured that's where I was supposed to go. I like science. Sure, I'll do it. So I floundered. That was my first problem. I went to college because I knew I was supposed to. I started science and I looked around the room and all I saw were guys. I was a female in a male world, and that was weird and that was hard. And I love that it's not that way anymore because I look around the room and it's very different now. I found my way to Central, and that was a whole personal discovery path that led me here that was tumultuous and nasty but I got here and I stayed. And I stayed because the professors I encountered were amazing. I had some great professors. A lot of them are in the room. I took organic chemistry from Dr. Fabry, and I think I exploded a fume hood with green gas with Ryan Davis, for those of you who remember Ryan. I took inorganic chemistry, and that was really scary because I had no idea what I was doing. But Ryan was my roommate, so he helped me through it. I took physical chemistry before I took calculus. Yeah, okay. I didn't realize that you were supposed to take calculus before PChem, and Dr. Rivera was very patient and very gracious, and I'm not sure if he ever knew that that was my struggle, but I was learning calculus while taking PChem. But he always made himself available. And there are so many professors, and that's why I stayed, because the professors were amazing. And I got research opportunities that I would have never gotten in a big university, and experiences and relationships with people that I didn't get when I was in Seattle and floundering through other university programs. But I still thought I was going to go to medical school. Whew, I was way off. At some point, I realized that the path I was on was not leading me any closer to graduation. I graduated high school in 2000. So I was getting close to 8 years without an undergraduate degree. They cut you off after a while. Did you know that? Like, you take out enough loans and you spend enough time here and they tell you, you got to go. And I was getting really close. I had an opportunity to TA for a lab. I think it was Chem 111. With a professor who has since retired. And I really loved it. I loved it. It was like the fire had been lit. I loved working in the lab, but not as a technician. I loved working with college students. I started TAing upstairs on the 3rd floor, and I loved my office hours. God, that's weird, right? To look forward to that, I loved it. It was great. At some point, at the strong suggestion of Dr. Sori, I took more classes. I started more in this field of education, and that was it. I stopped floundering. I did everything I could to graduate as fast as possible because I knew that was what I wanted to do. I knew I loved science, but I knew I loved the process of teaching just as much. So that's where I went. So my first path was definitely not my final path. It was dirty, it was ugly, but I got there and I love it. And this career is not always pretty. So I think we should probably chat about that. I talked a little bit about the undergraduate program. And I think the classes that helped me the most were, because I teach high school, the content I learned in those basic chem classes, I use every single day. The information I learned by helping out and doing work study in the storeroom, I use every day. That was really foundational for me. I loved the other classes, but I don't get to use them. I kind of relive the memories when I have student teachers come in. I have one right now who's going through your program, and she is wonderful. And we chat about PChem because I think she just finished it. And we chuckle about it, but that's as much as I get to use those classes. And they're a lot of fun. But really, if I were to go back and give suggestions to people who are going to head down this path, I would say, man, really pay attention to that 180 series. You're going to use it every day. Student teaching is so important. And I think that's where I did the bulk of my learning. We have an ed program here on campus, and they do a great job teaching pedagogy, the ideas behind learning. We can say we know the ideas, but we have to be able to put them into practice. And that happens with student teaching. And so find a mentor teacher that you want to emulate and go be with them. Learn how they do this thing. That's where you're going to get it. First job versus substitute teaching. I think there's kind of a stigma of, I graduate, I'm gonna get my first job, or I graduated, oh, I'm gonna substitute teach. Like, it's not a positive thing. But I think there are some people who are ready to teach just right when they're done. They have the charisma, they have the organization, they have the content knowledge, just go do it. 0 to 60. But there's a lot of people that need to practice it first. And so if you're going to go into teaching and you're thinking about this as a really exciting career opportunity, because it is, consider that. Substitute teaching is a really powerful way to practice your craft before you have to do it for real. It's like the dress rehearsal. And it's great. You learn how to make connections. You kind of learn what grade levels you like. I've had student teachers that thought they were going to teach high school, and then they substitute taught first grade, and I never saw them again. They taught first grade, and that's great. And they're here in town, and they're giving back to our first graders here at Ellensburg School District. The benefits of a master's degree. I know when you go out in industry, a master's degree is kind of pivotal as to what kinds of jobs you can get. In education, it's a little different. You could teach for 25 years and never get a master's. No one would look at you differently. The students wouldn't know any different. They have no idea that I have a master's degree. But in education, the purpose of getting a master's is seniority, it's pay, it's job security. So there is a benefit to getting a master's, and it really is a personal decision if those things are important. For me, originally, I got my master's because I wasn't sure if I was going to stay in high school. I thought at some point I might go up to the university level and that the master's would be the step to get the PhD. And I since know that that is not my place. That's not my path. There's a lot of types of certification. To get certified in a specific content area is an option. So if you graduate and you get certified in chemistry, you're certified in chemistry, nothing else. They'll tell you to teach other things, absolutely, but you are certified in chem. If you get certified in math, you're only certified in math. And why that's important is that if I want to get a job in Mercer Island School District and I'm only certified in chem, they will only hire me for a chem position. So certification is important. Ongoing professional development and clock hours. Ongoing professional development is really important. You have to constantly learn new things. There's this funny thing in education that they just change the name of stuff, but they reuse the same ideas. And there is some truth to that, but you have to learn the new acronyms. No, every once in a while, there is a new great idea and we have to get trained on it so we can use it, so we can give it back to our kids. For me, probably one of the most powerful things I ever did was my GLAD certification. That stands for Guided Language Acquisition Development. And it was a training I went through a whole summer so that I could teach chemistry to students that were bilingual, that did not speak English as their first language. And without professional development and knowing how to do that, I would have lost 90% of my East Valley population because they're almost all bilingual. And none of them envision themselves as being good at science. So I had to figure out how to get them to believe in themselves. And so professional development is pivotal. Trying different content areas. You're going to teach what they tell you to teach. So I'm not an astronomer. I'm not a geologist. I look at rocks and they're rocks. I don't know. I mean, I ski a lot. So I just went up to White Pass. And when you drive up White Pass, I look at these tall columns of igneous rock and they're beautiful and they're amazing. And I say, wow, look at those rocks. So I have to figure out how to teach different content areas because I can't just inspire ninth graders by saying, man, look at those cool rocks. We got to figure out what to do. Okay, this is where I'm at now. I said I don't envision myself going back to a PhD program, but why? Because I love giving back. I love coming back to Central. I love inspiring younger people to consider teaching. I love student teachers. I love having my door open and having them come in. So that's where I'm at. I don't need a PhD to do that, but I can certainly inspire others to pursue science and science education, whether it's at the high school level or much higher up. I really dislike PowerPoint. I'm sorry. So I just have to sort of make it snarky. This Academy Award goes to, when you think about teachers as being successful educators, what does that take? Because I don't do it in a bubble. I'm certainly not by myself. Finding great mentors, people who know how to do this better than me, is who I relied on for a long time. I have a strong team. There's 5 of us. We work together. We share everything. We talk every day. We support each other. We talk about kids. We talk about parents. We talk about lessons and labs. You can't do it by yourself. I build connections. I started off with that. I build connections with students and families. And probably one of the most important things that makes it feasible for me to do my job is that I make connections with people every single day. In fact, this is kind of weird to stand up here because normally I'm sitting in a chair at tables with kids. I teach sitting down. I teach talking one-on-one with kids and we have conversations. And then I roll my chair over to the next kid because I build connections with them. If I can convince them to meet me at the table, oh my God, all the science we can do. And so I do that. And I encourage my student teachers. In fact, I even take away the teaching station when teachers come into my room. And I tell them, you can't teach back there. You have to come out here. Get comfortable because this is where we live. We live with kids. I work for a supportive district. If I want it, they give it. So I have money. I have department money. I buy some really cool stuff. In fact, sometimes I'm searching for ways to buy cool stuff. Like I got to figure out, I got to spend some money. I got to do a cool lab. Let's find out what equipment I need. It's not like that in all districts, but several years ago, we had a really great grant writer at Ellensburg School District, and they gave us a lot of money. And so now as our science department, we get to do some pretty cool things with it. Continual professional development, I talked about that, and having a strong content knowledge, or at least the ability to fake it until you make it. So knowing who to call and who to talk to and where to go to get the help you need. I think I deleted the rest of my slides because I hate PowerPoint so much. I had some more. Any questions? Okay. Okay, yellow.
If you could change anything in your journey, like if you could keep us from doing this, what from doing that, would you, or are you happy with that future?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Would I change anything? I don't think I would have gotten to where I am without the struggles. It changes how I approach kids, living a life the way I did. There are times though, when I'm asked content questions in chem where I think, man, I wish I had paid more attention to fill in the blank. I often wish that they would teach some of those Chem 180 classes in the summer during times that I could take them. Because I think, oh, if I could just sit in on that lecture and hear that one piece of content again, I would. I don't know if I would do anything different though. I think the struggle is part of the journey and you have to feel it. And it's changed how I approach kids. I would have never sat at a rolly chair or talked to them face to face. I would have been that teacher who kind of stood back here. So yeah, thank you. Next one.
Exactly, you build a connection network between other parents and professors. As you said, you told Professor Cole to go over basically what is it, stockroom? How would you do that?
How do I build the connections? I love to talk. I'm not afraid. I think it's actually a genetic defect. Everyone in my family, we're talkers, just constant all the time. My husband tells me that he doesn't have to say anything because he knows I'll just fill in the space. He's very, very quiet. Yes. So how do I make those connections? I just pick up the phone, and I think I'm pretty humble about what I know and don't know. And I know that I don't know a lot. And so I'm quick to pick up the phone and say, you know, Tony, I have a storeroom that is a disaster and I need help fixing it. And so that happened, and it's been great. But I do the same thing at school. As much as I hate PowerPoint, I hate email even more. And so I get 5 minutes of passing time and I am out there running. I'm going to run to that teacher and talk to them face to face because email takes it away. I hate phone calls, so I say it in person. It can be scary for some people, right? Like to make those face-to-face connections. It's a little terrifying, but that's how I do it. Yeah. Any others?
Give another hand for. Let us stick out. Okay, I will give the microphone over to Professor Anthony Diaz to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you. Hey, Troy still is here. He didn't go for the pizza already. Okay, it is my great pleasure to introduce our final speaker of the afternoon, Troy Kilburn. Troy is was here, I think he graduated in 13. So I met Troy actually, I think through STEP originally. And he was in the STEP program. I was teaching in the STEP program. Then he started doing research with me. And I had him kind of off the beaten path. I was curious about some synthetic stuff that wasn't really my main thing. So it was kind of these sit down, hey, Troy, try that, see what happens. And you can't do that with every student. If you tell some students try that and see what happens, then they don't do anything because they need more direction than that. Troy wasn't like that. We got a chance to go to Vancouver, Washington to a display conference. Troy did a poster up there, and no joke, we drove over a bridge on I-5 over the Skagit River, and about 3 hours later, that thing collapsed. So the next morning, me and Troy and Max Wallace are in Vancouver watching the news, and we're like, weren't we just on that bridge? And yes, we were. Getting back home was interesting because that bridge was closed. Anyway, then one really cool thing that he did is he got involved in the REU program. So a lot of the undergraduates, you should know about this. If you don't, it's research experience for undergraduates all over the country. Troy did his at the University of Washington. And so after he finished his undergrad degree, they didn't save a spot for him, but it made it so that the faculty at UW knew who Troy was, and the person he wanted to work for knew who he was. So that helped him get into that program, get into the master's program there. So Troy did a master's degree at the University of Washington in chemistry. He also did a physics degree here, actually. And he turned all that knowledge of chemistry and physics, and now he's doing the right thing, and he's using it to make beer. So this is another really important thing that you can do with your knowledge, is turn it into beer, which I completely approve of. Honestly, it's kind of cool for me. Troy is someone I consider to be a friend now. You know, we see him a lot. He's been out to a lot of the concerts for a cure. Last couple of times we've had him, it's been a little while. Usually Troy brings the latest beer with him, stuff he's been messing with, trying to make. And I just, before I let Troy up here, I just want to echo something that Allie was just talking about her relationship with her students, how she feels about her students. That's really how we feel about you all. So you may be surprised to find that 10 years from now, we're going to remember you. If I see you on the street, I'm probably going to remember you. All of us are that way. The faculty here have that feeling about all of you, want you to be successful, enjoy those connections, enjoy hearing back from you, all those same kind of things. That's how we feel about you too. Come back and stay in touch. But this is where Troy's at now, actually, is down around Pike's Place. So I'll let Troy come up and tell us his story. Troy.
Thanks, Anthony. I'd like to compliment Lily and Allie's conversations with us earlier and all their experience and sharing their experiences. That was really exciting for me to see, because a lot of things that I have to share today too kind of echo what they're saying. First, I'd like to start off of talking about what I'm doing now, talking about Old Stove Brewing, and I also do professionally brew at Big Time Brewing, which is the oldest brew pub in Seattle. So we'll talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll get to the fun experiences and how life is not as linear as we're all thought it was supposed to be. So let's see this. All right, so Old Stove Brewing is in the Pike's Place market. They started about 6 years ago at the corner. And then eventually in 2016, they built an addition to the market that's called the Market Front. There we have a gorgeous view of the Puget Sound, like we saw in the previous picture there. We brew a ton of beer. We serve a lot of tourists. And we've been so successful there that we're able to start a second location. We just opened up just a little tiny tasting room also in Seattle called Old Stove Ship Canal. It's a tiny little place, still like a 50-person brew pub, which we have some big aspirations for as well. Thank you. To kind of like highlight the volume that we're doing, again, we're in the Pike's Place market. There's a lot of tourists that come through there. We are a kind of a volume brewery. So in 2022, we produced 2.6 thousand barrels. So that's about 80,000 gallons. Or for those of you looking to do the math at home there, I did the math as well for how many pints that is. That's a lot of beer production. We can't move all that in the market location. But in 2022, we sold about 320,000 pints, the equivalent of that. So we got a pretty big operation. We have a lot of people coming through, a lot of people that I like talking about our cool beer too. We also have a full kitchen and do some really delicious food. We employ, it depends on when in the year, somewhere between 50 and 100 people. So it's a pretty big operation. Come summer, we obviously need a lot more as the tourist crowds come in, and then winter, we kind of pare back down. And I've played a lot of the roles at Old Stove Brewing. I started off as a host, and now I'm the general manager. So I'm kind of overseeing day-to-day operations, working on not only success for the day, but for the next month, for the next year, and what those kind of plans look like. Obviously, I don't do that in a vacuum. I have a great team of coworkers that I'm working with that help me out with some of those things. Scheduling is a big one. I'm glad that one's not on my plate anymore. You can never make everybody happy. You can only make a lot of people unhappy. And you never guess right either, right? You think you have what the day's going to look like down, and then it gets sunny and it's twice as busy. So I'm glad that I have a great team of people to work with on some of those things. To kind of like frame things, I kind of always started off with the science bend. I was really hoping I could find this picture from first grade where I won like the most likely to be scientist award, but I wasn't able to find that. And so digging through my old stuff, I couldn't really find any great pictures to tie into the presentation, but I did find an old chemistry lab that was able to find flame ion lab that we did. Digging some through those old reports is pretty funny. You find the summary at a high school level is not the summary of a college lab report. It was basically a journal entry, and it was hilarious. But I do want to highlight that one of the things that I did know about coming to Central is I wanted to do chemistry, which is a huge blessing. I had an awesome AP Chem teacher, so thank you for all the hard work in high schools of getting kids invested. She would do Friday mysteries for us. So she would do some sort of demo. We'd have to think about it. We'd have to take what we learned that week and apply it to what we saw. So not only were we taking observations, but then we're applying what we saw. So I loved chemistry. I knew that was the direction I was going to go when I got to Central. I also had a first restaurant job there just to kind of back into the restaurant industry. I worked at McDonald's for a summer. That was, quick and easy and high school job. The next thing I moved on to was Central. Part of the reason I picked it was I could afford it. I had a lot of scholarships. I was a pretty bright academic student. And so it was very easy to get a good portion of my tuition covered coming to Central. And I'm really glad that I did. Honestly, the things that I am able to do, and I'm still being called back to help you guys out with, are amazing opportunities. I eventually went on to UW, and I can't imagine the things that I get to do here as opposed to there, right? I got to work with Diaz in the research lab. Chemistry club is a huge one. We got to do some teaching, some tutoring, working in the labs as a TA. All these things are things that you probably don't get an undergrad experience elsewhere. But all these skills are very actually valuable and things that I'm going to kind of show I actually use now, even though I'm not necessarily doing my chemistry degree per se. All these skills that I learned along the way and attained here at Central come back. I did appreciate though, when I found that Flame Lab picture that I found this picture of the flaming snowballs. I wasn't directly involved with this. I was helping with a little bit of the development, but this happened right here 10 years ago, where we kind of had all these flaming snowballs, put the different ions on there. We had a little bridge of gun cotton. And so when they lit it, it just worked perfectly. It was gorgeous. So it was some of those things that when I was doing chemistry club back in the day, explaining to high schoolers that this is a felony if you do it on your home, but if you're doing it for education, it's education. So I also got to work with Diaz on some European dope phosphors. So that was a good tie-in, like you said, for a research opportunity. I got to go kind of network and stuff. So I just want to highlight some of the skills here that I picked up either from Chem Club or from teaching or for research. Education was a big one. I really enjoy teaching people. I love talking. It's one of the reasons I'm back here is to give you guys some guidance on the few things that I picked up. Leadership, you can see me here in the picture of the chemistry club, working on the National Chemistry Day display. I also have some friends that you might recognize. Brandon on the side there, who's going to be in the back there, and our friend Ryan, who had a physics degree. Learned a little bit of management, right? If you're working as a TA, you'll know how to manage your class. That's not necessarily micromanaging by any means, but it's how does this overall work? If there's a problem, I'm the point person. How do I take that responsibility? Same thing with team leadership. I like to joke that I was the emperor of the chemistry club that year. I was the president. We just got a lot of things done because I wanted to do them, and it was a lot of fun to do all these things. From teaching, I learned eavesdropping. It's a very valuable skill. Just knowing when somebody has a problem before they can express it is something that I definitely use now. And networking too. Like Diaz was mentioning, the next step in my career from Central was to move on to UW. One of those things was meeting the future professor that I'd work with, both at the ACS conference and through the REU. So at the University of Washington, I got to work with Daniel Gamlin on some copper-doped nanocrystals and their photophysics. I got a couple publications, but that's not really the highlight here. The highlight is I also got to continue a little bit more of the TA, and I was a lead TA, so I was managing the TAs as some skills there. I did pick up some really cool chemistry skills. Synthesis of nanomaterials is pretty cool. And then the photophysics of them is also pretty cool. You get to shoot lasers at things. This wasn't my setup, but it was the best picture I could find. So while I was there, it was also right at a time where Seattle was kind of going through a beer renaissance. Rubens was, still a small tasting room. Fremont was a tiny place, but we were making some of the best beer in Seattle. So one of the other skills I picked up in grad school was homebrewing. You can see one of my setups here, started with the Gatorade cooler. I know that the brewing program here in Central is new. It would be super cool if I would have been able to take it at the time, but you can start with very low barrier entry of learning how to brew. Very, very simple and quick and easy. And you can make some good stuff. But some of the other things I picked up from grad school, from teaching or from research, is that data-driven decision-making, like really kind of trying to figure out like what should I be working on next? Here's what the data says. Obviously data analysis is part of that as well. One of the funny ones I like to throw in here is tri-clamps. For those of you who don't know tri-clamps, it's basically just a way of holding two things together, which is really heavily used in the brewing industry. Mentorship was a big one. So I got to lead a couple people through the science that we were working on together. So I had an undergrad underneath me and then an exchange student as well. And then the networking part is also important as well that I picked out of here. So enjoying the local beer scene in Seattle, I've picked up a friend, Jake. Him and I were kind of thick as thieves for a little bit in my grad school career. And that was what helped move on to the next thing. I was working on my PhD at UW and didn't know why I needed to finish it. I got to the point where I kind of was pigeonholing myself into three options. I could go into government research. I could work for Facebook if I wanted to stay local on their Oculus program, or I could become a professor and fight for funding my entire life. And none of those things seemed like things I wanted to do. And so kind of lost at this point. This is the first point where I kind of felt like it failed, which is not true. Thanks. Sorry for saying no on that. But this is the first time in my life where I hit something where I didn't complete it. I was intending to finish it and I didn't. But I got to go elsewhere. And I actually got to also use some luminescence experience. So I worked for a metals for aerospace company called Exotic Metals Forming Company. They make parts for Boeing, like the cones and nozzles and airplane engines. Knowing nothing about airplanes or manufacturing, this was a cool learning experience for me. I actually did pick up a lot of skills. So one of the things that we did, I was an operations engineer, which was a made up title for we don't want to train a real engineer or pay a real engineer for this problem. And so I got to struggle through some things of learning and growing in a business that was definitely trying to save some money. We did some really cool day-to-day operations things, making the operations a lot easier for the people who are doing them. We also stood up a new building, which was a cool experience as well. What it takes and how many people takes to actually get a new facility in. Part of that was redesigning their fluorescent penetrant inspection operation, which is what's shown here. It's a way of looking at weld defects and seeing if they need to get redone. So there's things that were specs that have to get met, but how we flow that and how do we make it more efficient and how do we apply lean manufacturing principles to it were things that I got to develop and grow and work with a lot of people on changing the way they thought about it. So I was really bringing an outside view at things, and that was something that was pretty challenging because a lot of people are like, well, you don't actually know anything about this, and this is the way we always do it, so why would we do it this other way? I also got to do some weld defect like pattern tracing, so doing a lot of data analysis on that. So I made some pretty gnarly spreadsheets. This is kind of a picture of the building we're setting up in different places. The FPI is where I was proposing we were putting in this inspection process location wise. But I learned a lot from this job. I got to work on my Excel macro skills, which is not the best way of doing data analysis. I understand that, and everybody who can learn Python and Ruby and all the other actual programming languages learn those. But they can do some things and impress some people. I learned how to be working in a business, which was important too. Learning how to use Outlook, knowing how to put things on people's calendars and send emails in a way that makes sense was a big one. I learned a lot about lean manufacturing, which is a cool idea. Like, how do we do more things with less, and not needing as many what's the way to say that? Not having as much excess, I guess. Making sure that you have what you need when you need it. I had to do bids for quotes and making sure that when I was making the new help setting up the new building. Like we got the right oven and how that was going to work with our process. I talked about designing operations spec a little bit. The one that I definitely took the longest to learn was working with many stakeholders. So people that care about the project, people who are either going to be using it or have a financial stake in it, or think you're messing up. You have to make a ton of people happy, and so you can't just come in with one idea and be like, "This is what we're doing," because so many people shoot that down very quickly. And so it took a lot of learning to get how to make that happy, making that many people happy. I learned a little bit of project management too, which is kind of cool. Learning how to use Gantt charts and try to figure out how processes kind of come all together, how they need to come together to make it all work, and then also how to value outside ideas on what already exists. I did not particularly enjoy the shop, but after that, I got to go do something I did enjoy. And that was pour beer. I again, through the powers of networking, met up with the owner of Lucky Envelope Brewing and started pouring beer for him. It was fun. It was easy. I got to talk about beer all the time, which comes back to the education things I learned here at Central. I also then started, hosting and busing, serving at Old Stove Brewing down in the market as well. And so I really picked up another set of skills here too that are still ones I'm going to use going forward. Bringing back the eavesdropping powers. That's super handy when you're serving, of knowing like somebody can't decide what they want. You're like, hey, let me help you with this before they even know that they need help. Customer service is a big one, and then keg washing and line cleaning as well. So in 2019, I left Lucky Envelope completely, and then transitioned to both brewing professionally at Big Time Brewing, which is again the oldest brew pub in Seattle. It's my part-time fun thing that I get to hang out and get paid for my hobby. It's great. But I get to pull a lot of the skills that we've kind of talked about before back for this, right? From Central, like that networking and education piece are huge. I get to do tours of the brewery every once in a while and like talk through to people like how beer production happens, and really try to like convey all that stuff to an outside group. The UW, the tri-clamps. I don't really have, oh, there's one right here. This is what they look like. It's just a way of holding two pieces of metal together. There's a gasket in there too, so you don't leak. Something that I picked up at UW before I ever realized that was going to be applicable outside of science. I get to bring some outside ideas to the brewing process. So a lot of times, the head brewer is, hey, we should do it this way. I was like, wait, well, why do we do it that way? Why don't we try this? And he's like, oh yeah, I don't know, let's try that. One of the most important ones is color coding buckets. So in brewing, a lot of times you'll have sanitizer and you'll have caustic, and you'd like to know which one's which without dipping your hands in. So that was one I was excited to change. I also get to do some keg washing and line cleaning too, which I picked up at Lucky Envelope. But for my bigger job here as general manager of Old Stove Brewing, I get to it can very clearly tie all the things that I picked up from Central, from UW, Exotic, and even times serving to what I'm doing now. We do education events for our staff in the slow season, partially to get them hours, partially to educate them even more, which I think personally hosted 2 of like the 6 events that we did this year. Leadership, I lead a team of 2 AGMs, a bar manager, and a couple like leads too, in the kitchen side of it as well, making sure that things go as best as possible we can at the market. There's a lot of things that we get to tackle, right? We're a volume restaurant, so how do we serve? I think our busiest day last year was like 40K in sales, which we sold approximately like half a fermenter, like 1/2 of a batch of beer in a single day. Like, how do we like balance this and make this work? Because there's going to be a lot of logistics making that happen. Team leadership is a big one as well. Making sure like the people underneath me are still learning and growing some of the skills that I've got. One of the ones that has been a big one recently is the working with many stakeholders one. We're redesigning our flight boards, and our bar managers in charge of that project. And I've had so many fights with him of like, hey, you got to make me happy, you got to make them happy, and I'm trying to help you learn that this is the process. You can't just say this is the answer. You got to work with everybody. So obviously still using the eavesdropping, making sure like things are going well around the restaurant. The networking is super important as well. But also the data-driven analysis, right? That's something unique that somebody coming from science in a management role has. My owner, I think, is always surprised when he like can see the like Excel spreadsheets I put together of like, here's our profit, here's our loss, like here's what we're working for and why we're making these decisions. I think it just surprises them that people can kind of think of it in that way. I also get to do a lot of mentorship. I love being able to bring that skill from UW, especially to help bring other people up. Lean manufacturing is a fun one as well when it comes to the brewing industry. There's like, how do you do things in ways that make more sense or get things right when you need it? From ordering like soda bibs, like, what if we have a system where we do a Kanban system where once we, pull this thing, we need to reorder it so it shows up right and when we need it. That way we're not carrying as much inventory, we're more profitable, and could kind of communicate clearer to when things need to happen. Yeah, so all of these skills that I've learned from across, all the times and different phases have all kind of helped grow to like make me a better general manager than any one path could have. So because I bounced around to different things, because I got extra skills, because I dropped out of the PhD program, all these things come together to help make me a better, more valuable candidate in what I'm doing now. So that's kind of the takeaways that I wanted to make sure that we communicated, and then kind of echo from the previous presentations. Skills transfer in unexpected ways. You never know like what you're learning now and how that's going to apply down the road. So make sure that you're invested in what you're learning on the day to day. Don't be afraid of changing careers, paths, industries. It works out for a lot of people to go to something they like. When it comes to grad school, I think my biggest piece of advice is know why you want to go. For me, I kind of chose that way because it was kind of just the next step. I thought, it was that or find a job. And I had some connections that helped make that path slightly easier. But the people that I saw most successful in grad school were the ones that knew why they were there. They had either worked in industry for a little bit and now they wanted to, help expand what they could do, or they knew what that next job for them was. So take some time to think about that. Don't just necessarily jump to it because it's the next easiest thing. And find an industry you connect with. We got to hear from other presentations that you can bounce around so you find something you love. And for me, that was the brewing industry. I get to educate people about beer. I get to serve people and help them out and make their lives better. That really helps connect with me. I do want to thank the chemistry department. This is an awesome experience, asking us to come back and give back. And one that I'm super honored to be able to do. And that we're even having people come back is super cool. So thanks again for all the effort that you put into me and my generation and everybody that I graduated with, but also this next one as well.
If possible, I would be I'm just curious about this weld defect fluorescence measurement.
Yeah.
Is that something that's summarizable in a few sentences?
Yeah, so the it's less of a measurement. So what they do is they paint the weld with a fluorescent dye. And because it's solvent, it's going to like leach into the little cracks that have developed. After like since they're dries, they go through UV and then they inspect it. So it's just by eye, like, hey, we can see this here, circle it, send it back, get it rewelded. Yep, exactly. Yep, yeah. So they rinse off like the excess, and you can see the defects left over. It goes everywhere. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it is a lot more scientifically sound than it looked. I do, yeah. So I'm about like 1 day a week at Big Time Brewing. It just depends on when I have a free day. Hit up the head brewer like, hey, do you need help today? So it depends on what needs to get done, whether we're brewing or some cellar work or cleaning. It depends on what needs to get done. Great questions. So
Yes and yeah.
yeah. So the funny part about the brewing process is it's exactly the same for whatever you're doing. You're going to change up your grains, you're going to change up your hops when you add them, maybe what temperature you're mashing at. So like style to style brewing, there's not much difference. It doesn't really matter. But my favorite one to brew is usually our Kolsch because we use the less amount of grain. It's the least work. Is in the brewing process, we use about 1,000 pounds, give or take, of the batch. of grain. So when I first started there, being the oldest brew pub in Seattle, I meant I got to drag all that grain from the mill all the way down to a very short auger. We've thankfully now have a longer auger that runs the whole path, so I don't have to bring it to the mash tun. But now I do have to still, or everybody still has to mash out. So now you have all that 1,000 pounds of wet grain, which is now a lot more weight. So the Kolsch is a little bit nicer because we don't use quite as much. When it comes to drinking, I'm a very seasonal beer drinker, so it depends what the weather's like, what the day is. It kind of depends. So I don't know. If I have to pick one, it's probably gonna be like a West Coast IPA as a classic go-to. But you know, dark beer season's on us right now. I've been really digging the Doppelbock that we had on at work that just kicked. So there's quite a few good styles to try from.
When it comes to brewing, being a brewmaster, what amount is art? What amount is science? And what's the crossover? And how can you help the artisans become more scientific? Or maybe the scientists become more artistic?
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I think it depends on your background. So being a old brew pub, there's a lot of more mythos and more this is just what we've been doing the entire time. It's there can be a lot less like measuring down to exact science, right? You know, whether that's we know the scale's kind of broken, so we're close by like 10 grams on our salts, or you know, whoops, I opened this bag and now it's gonna be in the beer. Like that happens. So there's definitely a lot of art that goes into it. I think that there's also can be a very science side of things. I've met other brewers that are very meticulous in their weights and how they do things and documentation. I think the hardest part about like brewing and calling it science is you don't really have your control set, right? So you can have it. You can basically do things exactly the same way in different brews, and then it'll be slightly different tastes at the end. So yeah, it's a lot harder to call it a science when you have so many variables you can't control.
Flubber 3.0.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, yeah.
Yes, to farmers markets, to have broke people like us.
So big time, even though it's the oldest brew pub in Seattle, it's a hyper local place. So it's on the Ave right next to UW. It's a 15-barrel system, but we don't do a whole lot of keg sales. Everything is in-house. So I guess yeah, we don't ever bring it to the farmers market, but yeah, we are helping the poor grad students.
Yeah, I have made him in every single farmer's market. And he gives me beer all the time.
He doesn't get paid for that.
Drinking. Yes, because he knows I don't drink.
I have a question about beer. Can you make beer glow in the dark?
So I had that thought too, especially especially with you know, background in luminescence. I thought one time, yeah, let's try to make a luminescent beer. Let's hit it with a laser and make it glow. And then I realized there's so much DNA and proteins in there. It already does. So it's a lot less cool than it sounds. All beer glows if you hit it with a laser. Dayglow beer. Yeah, Legion makes that. So I mean, it would be a fun challenge. I think that what you could do is yeah, probably put some luminophore in there that would glow. You know, there's a lot of food safe dyes that glow Gatorade, but I think it would be hard to perceive, right? Especially with just room lighting. You know, a lot of us drink Gatorade not knowing that it's constantly luminescing, but it's only because like the emission absorption or so overlap there. That'd be an expensive beer.
Any other questions? Okay, let's thank Troy again.
Thanks, everybody.
Our other two speakers to come down. We do have pizza outside. I don't want to, I know it's probably getting a little bit cold, but We do like to give gifts to the speakers who come back for their trouble. Speakers are also going to be hanging out a little bit, if I'm correct. So if you guys have questions, you go ahead and ask them. I do have to say, with the really cool flaming snowball picture that Troy put up there, I was the Chem Club advisor at that time. Sadly, we cannot do that demo anymore. Unfortunately, flaming snowballs can become flaming grenades, and so that kind of spoiled it. But it was a really cool demo when we did it. I would like the picture because we don't actually have that one. That would be awesome. Cool. Want to hand out the
Beer koozie or socks.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we have socks from Old Stove over here. Okay. Here you go, Troy. Thank you. Thank you once again. Lily? This one's for Lily. Thank you. Here you go. Thank you all. So thanks everyone for coming. And if you do have any questions, the speakers will be around. And one thing that all the speakers talked about was it's okay not to know what you want to do with your life. That's cool. As Anthony Diaz has said a lot at our spring picnics in the past, you know, you get your bachelor's in chemistry. That means you can then figure out what you want to do. You know, you can't take that degree away from you. So, you know, some of the professors here, their trajectories were not linear either. I spent some time as a rock climbing and skiing mom before I went to graduate school. So the trajectory is not always linear on that. And that's one thing that was emphasized. So, and that's fine. Yes. Sure. Yeah, pizza. So
there's pizza and drinks out in the foyer, and then we're gonna have cookies back up in here, so y'all can come in and out, definitely visit with the speakers, whatever you want to do.
thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, you should get it. Yeah, for the faculty, you know, it's kind of fine. Well.
No chat.